Hi, everyone, and welcome to our show, Discovering Laguna Woods Village. I'm Cyndee Whitney, and today we're going to be discovering something about the creative process. We're in the beautiful home of Nancy Klann and Richard Moren, and as we look around, we see the beautiful artifacts that they have made and continue to make. And so we're going to do a little bit different show today because we're going to ask, how do you do this? How do you do the thing you do that's so creative so that other people can perhaps be inspired by what you're sharing with us? So we're talking now to Nancy Klann Moren. Nancy, you are a novelist and a writer of short stories.
I am.
And I think we all have that, great American novel in us somewhere. What would you say to somebody that says, I'm here now, I've got some time, I'd like to develop my writing skills, maybe to write a memoir or maybe to write a novel? How would they get started?
And a lot of people do want to do that. I've talked to a lot of people. And there are a couple of options. We do have the Writers Club here at Clubhouse 3 once a month, and attending those meetings, you meet like-minded people and you can talk about writing. I have started teaching at the Santa Barbara Writers Conference this last summer. I had a workshop which made me think about creating a workshop here in Laguna Woods, and I'm going to be pursuing that in the near future, probably maybe in October.
What would be some of the things that you would share with people, instruct or develop?
Well, a lot of people just want a little help to get started and want to do it in a more professional way rather than just writing, as an amateur would. And a lot of people want to tell their stories. When I was at the Writers' Conference, we concentrated on sensory details.
Oh.
A lot of people forget to put in smells and tastes.
Context.
And, yes. Yeah. Weak words and strong words and active versus passive writing.
Yes.
So there would be maybe a different subject each week.
I see.
And then some read and critique.
Where do most of your stories come from? Do you read about something, or have you traveled somewhere and say, I think there's a story in there that I'd like to write about? Is that how you get your story ideas?
My stories are very character driven.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's just a feeling, like if I'm someplace and it's real muggy, I get a feeling, and then I start writing about, the mugginess of and it just flows. I wanted an Airstream trailer to be in one of my stories. So I just started writing. I had heard that somebody named their Airstream the Silver Twinkie. And I could just picture it. And so I just wrote the Silver Twinkie, and I started a story. And all of my characters are very eccentric and a little kooky, and I just prefer fiction because I can make anything up. Sure.
I think historical fiction is what I would. I don't know if that's what you intended, but that's the Clock of Life. I read that, and it's about a boy whose dad was killed in Vietnam, and he's living through the civil rights movement and very difficult times in the South. And so, now, did you intend to write the story about those events and tell it through these characters? It's so richly done.
Yeah, well, it basically is a coming-of-age story with the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights movement woven through the story. Interestingly enough, it started off being a short story. I went to a writer's conference and read from it, and the instructor said, well, what are you doing for the next couple of years? Because that's a novel, not a short story.
Wow.
And
that was good advice.
And so I said, no, I just write short stories. Oh. He had planted the seed.
Yeah.
It took about a year before I thought, well, why not? I could at least try it.
Yes.
So I just took the characters and made the story bigger and bigger and bigger.
It's great. It's fun. I giggled several places as things were unfolding in this young boy's life and his mom and so forth. And there were tragic things, of course. And the story was a compelling read, for sure, and I absolutely loved it. And as I said, I know we have it here in our library, so I encourage everyone to look up The Clock of Life. It was really marvelous. And you have the dialogue is written in sort of a southern, young boy. How did you get inside a young boy's head, at that age? It's just...
I don't know.
It's just marvelous.
I don't know. I don't know how I get into the heads of many of my characters. It's just a process, and it's just a creative outlet.
Well, I'm sure this is something that everybody wants to know. How do you write something like that? And I'm sure it's an iterative process where you say, well, I can't solve this story point right here, so I'll go a little farther down and I'll write about something there. Or
you get someplace and you realize that your subconscious has tied it into something you wrote earlier. And that's when the fun really begins.
Yeah.
And then you go back and then you can, like I say, weave maybe the premise a little, deeper.
Yes. Artists, I know, always trust their subconscious, because you can give your mind a problem as you go to bed at night,
yes.
and your subconscious has answered it. Unfortunately, it answers it sometimes at 3 a.m.
Yeah, and sometimes 3 months later.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah. But this is great. It's good to get inside a process. Because I know, as I say, a lot of people have maybe moved here and their work has not allowed them, their life's work has not allowed them to have the time, the luxury to work on something over an extended period of time. And I think writing is something that really appeals to so many people. So I know they'll hear your words and read your work and say, I think I've got that in me, and I'll start with a short story.
Yes. Well, for me, it did start with short stories because I had no writing experience at all. But I was an advertising executive and doing a lot of traveling, flying a lot. And I took a class at UC Irvine, creative writing, and I just started mostly on airplanes. I would longhand, and then I'd expand them.
Now, do you work on a computer now?
Yes, yes, I do.
Well, some very famous authors do longhand.
I know.
That's legal pads.
And I started off that way. I thought for some reason I thought the work would be less if I switched to the computer. But when you have to rewrite everything in longhand, you... cut and paste and move on. Well, this is marvelous. I so thank you for allowing us to get inside your head and think about what this process is, how you get started, how you go about doing it. And I'm sure you have to be patient with yourself. And do you ever, I'm sure you do, hit the wall. Everybody hits the wall from time to time, and you say, I've got to get away from this. I'll come back with a fresh eye. Well, for me, one of the best parts about writing, for me, is rewriting. Rewriting and rewriting and looking at each sentence and trying to figure out how you can make it better.
Yes.
And what it does for the story. My biggest struggle is the first write, getting it all down on paper, then coming back and enhancing it and making it better and better and better. That's the part I love.
Do you give it to maybe somebody that takes on an editing task, somebody that say, does this make sense to you as a fresh eye? Does this make sense? Have I threaded things together properly? Do you do that?
I haven't ever used a proper editor, but I have belonged to many writers' groups, and there are maybe one of them is an editor, so I get the benefit of that.
Oh, that's great. That's
as I'm writing along.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for letting us come inside your head a little bit and learn about this process, because I know that a lot of people are going to be more inclined to think about it and maybe give it a try. And we want to know more about your workshop when you get that sort of finalized.
Yes, I'll be putting that out probably in October.
In October, wonderful. I will look forward to. I would love to attend that myself, because I think improving your writing skills improves your communication skills in general. So, thinking about the order of things and thinking about the context of your conversation and so forth. So I think that would be great to attend. So we look forward to that announcement.
Down.
I will come on down for sure. Nancy, thank you so much for inviting us into your beautiful home today and sharing your process. I learned so much from what you were saying. It's just fascinating, and I'm going to show up at your workshop.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming in and sharing with us.
Absolutely. Our pleasure.
Okay.
So, Richard, I want to ask you about your process. We're looking at the how-to. How do you get started? If somebody was here and they always wanted to play with clay and they always wanted to get into their hands in clay and start doing something, how do you go about thinking about starting a piece?
Well, my process is, because I've done quite a few different pieces, is pretty simple for me, but I would like to just approach like a beginner would come in. I think that would be better. If you're beginning and you don't know anything about clay, but you've always wanted to get your hands dirty, the first thing you do is buy an apron. Really. And then you can get dirty, down and dirty. So you squeeze that stuff until it comes out of your fingers, like mush, and it's really kind of fun. And then you start looking at it and you realize that you can pretty much manipulate it into anything. I come home from work, and most of the time I end up, Nancy will tell you, I end up in Clubhouse 4. And I'm there, sometimes I'm supervisor, other times just there as an artist, and I totally enjoy the ceramics. The best part of it is actually you get to help people. So you're there and people ask questions and they go like, the usual question is, how long did that take you?
Yes.
You go like, well, 76 and a half years and 20 minutes.
Right.
We have a good time down there. We're always looking for new people, and they're very welcome to come in. And typically we'll show them what to do, and there's classes. Saddleback has classes.
Yes.
And they're very, very good, and a lot of good instructors.
So the equipment that is there, the kilns are good quality. It's
Right.
kind of an industrial environment,
Right.
isn't it, to some
Yeah.
extent? So
We actually have a brand new set of kilns, and it's really helped a lot. So in the last couple of weeks, they've been fired, and they're really producing well.
well, that's great.
So it's a big change from what we used to have.
And as something is fired, there's someone there from the community, an instructor or someone that
Yes.
does that for you. So you're basically working with the clays and glazes and so forth, and somebody else puts it in. You're not
in
any danger.
basically in the bisque fire and the glaze fire, they will typically they have a tech. We have a new tech, and of course we've got GRF provides the staff.
Right.
And they do a great job. So we're looking forward to a really good finish to this year and a good next year.
That's wonderful.
Sabine is the head of
Yes.
the entire Clubhouse 4, and she's great. She's very thorough, very knowledgeable.
Yes, I agree. And in all of those 8 studios, she knows about each one of them. I love working with Sabine.
Yeah, she's great. The other thing for beginners, I think everyone's welcome, and it would be really good for beginners to come in and they can see what we're doing. They can ask all the questions they want. If you're a resident, you can come in anytime. You don't have to take a class.
Oh, that's good.
Typically, we like to see them, if they want to glaze anything, they'll have to join the Potters and Sculptors Club because we provide those things along with Saddleback.
Okay. The work that you produce is absolutely breathtaking.
Oh,
absolutely
thank you.
breathtaking.
Thank
It's just
you.
beautiful. So, Richard, I want to ask you about your process. We're looking at the how-to. How do you get started? If somebody was here and they always wanted to play with clay and they always wanted to get into their hands in clay and start doing something, how do you go about thinking about starting a piece?
Well, my process is, because I've done quite a few different pieces, is pretty simple for me, but I would like to just approach like a beginner would come in. I think that would be better. If you're beginning and you don't know anything about clay, but you've always wanted to get your hands dirty, the first thing you do is buy an apron. Really. And then you can get dirty, down and dirty. So you squeeze that stuff until it comes out of your fingers, like mush, and it's really kind of fun. And then you start looking at it and you realize that you can pretty much manipulate it into anything. It's not the sturdiest material until it's fired. Immediately, once it dries, it's really, really fragile, so you got to be really careful. But the fun part is that you can do almost anything to it, as long as you don't let it dry. Once it's dry, you're done. You can't add anything, you can't fix anything, it's just done. So what you want to do is make sure that you're tightly wrapped or whatever, and you keep it moist, and then you can end up with a real masterpiece. You can keep working on it. You let it dry out, and when you're finished, of course, and there you go. It's a perfect piece. It goes into the kiln to be bisque fired, which is step one. And then it comes out of that after 24 hours, and you're into glaze or whatever you want to do. A lot of people love the glazing part because it's really complex. You can make your own glazes. I started out, I think, way back in the 70s. I took a class in ceramic because I could never do it in college. And the biggest problem I had was all my design classes were at the same time as the ceramics. So when I got to where I was on my own completely and I had my own business and everything, I had some time. And I took this class, and it was like a 3-month class. The instructor said, "Well, you're so much better than I am. Do you want to teach a class?" So I said, "Sure, why not?" So I taught for like 2 years, beginning ceramics. And I have to say I didn't know that much about it, but I could actually move the clay. I learned a tremendous amount then about glazes and really got into it and all the different materials that you need to know about and what creates what. Then I just took off. I took off from ceramics. I just said, okay, that's it. I didn't touch anything for like 25 years.
Really?
Yeah. And then I was in Palm Springs, and I went to this place called Palapas, and it was really a creative spot, and it was like they put on like special events for doctors and conventions and things. But it was half landscape and selling of plants and trees, and the rest was artist studios. And I saw these guys doing raku,
yes,
which just blew me away. So that's what you'll see in most of my pieces.
Yes.
I
you
still
like the
love
danger of raku because it looks frightening when you watch it happening.
Yeah, it is. It isn't safe.
No.
Let's put it that way.
No.
But it's fun because you never know what you're going to get.
Yes.
And it's all dependent upon the glaze and the timing and the temperature.
Can I ask you a question about some of your beautiful coil pieces? Because I think those are people have a curiosity about how did you begin that? Because I think there's an architectural feature to that, and engineering, because they look as though they might tip over because they're so well designed. How
there's
do you do
quite
that?
a story behind that. I started out, I really fell in love with the Jomon dynasty, which was in Japanese history. It started actually about, I think, 14,000 BC.
Goodness.
And it lasted until about 400 AD, and then kind of disappeared. But they made all of their pieces, earliest pieces went right to a point. And it was for a purpose. They cooked in them. So they would stick them right into the fire, into the sand, and build a fire around them. And then they were able to cook their seafood and everything else. So they were very much into the organic shapes and curves. I sort of picked up on that, and I got into the coiling because I loved the look, the nautical, like the nautilus shell, etc.
Right.
And so I took it from there, and I just started doing it. And then I developed I got into laminated layers of clay, where I'd get like in a quarter of an inch, I'd probably have 12 layers of clay, black and white clay. And compress it until it was really thin, and then I would coil that. And I think I have a few pieces here, a couple of them on the end that show that.
We'll show those.
And
because I thought that when I looked at them, I thought there was an African feeling to them, maybe because of the glazes, or a Moorish quality to them, because it doesn't seem to be one cultural background. It seems to be sort of transcend those things.
It does. I studied architecture and the history of architecture, so I began looking at different things that have been done in different countries. And one of the greatest things that I learned was from the Persians. And they would actually build out of a rectangular brick, they would build a curved barrel vault without any formwork. And they would start out by putting the bricks in a herringbone pattern, so they were up at an angle. And then the next brick would sit over it, or onto the halfway onto the next one. So as it dried, every day it would dry, then the next day they would put another row on it. So it's pretty much what you have to do with the coiling. So what I took with my coils, I would actually develop that same concept, but I would do it by making it more like a jigsaw puzzle. So my coils would actually interconnect with the next coil.
Amazing.
So
this
when
is
you
your
get
own
into
technique?
you get into these beautiful bowls that come way out. That's what holds it together.
Yes.
Otherwise, it just would break and go. And I've had plenty of those.
I was going to ask, when you said raku, I began to ask you about your attrition levels, because it's such a risky process.
Yeah.
But getting back to somebody who's maybe starting out, I'd say probably comfort level with things, a slow learning process at first, because there's many things to consider in the making of the piece, and the firing of the piece, and the glazing of the piece, and several firing processes.
Actually, I think it's better to be as loose as possible when you first start out, because you have to get to know the material.
Right. So make something small, or
right.
And then where do you got your inspiration? How do you suggest somebody else get inspiration for what they want to make?
Well, like I say, just go in there and start playing. Get yourself a bag of clay.
Yep.
And get used to it. See what it feels like.
Yep.
Just start making something.
It's very meditative too, people say.
Yeah.
It
is. It's funny because people will go in there and they won't say a word. They'll just work. They're just like in their own little world.
Sure.
A lot of people bring their earphones and they listen to their own music.
That's great.
Or we have Alexa. Who provides us with almost everything.
Yes.
In any case, that's pretty much what I would suggest is you can take a class at Saddleback.
Yes.
Or you can just come in. If you're a resident, you can come in anytime.
And there are supervisors in there, such as yourself, who will answer your questions and not let you get hurt.
Yeah. The only times that you can't actually be in, maybe if there's a class going on, especially if there's a nude model, they kind of frown on that, Of
course.
So you have to keep the guys away from the window,
Yeah.
Well,
that's art.
Guys and gals, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Well, thank you so much for that's kind of a peek behind the curtains of how, I look at your work and I think I wouldn't even know where to begin. I don't even know how you would start such a thing, because it's so interesting to look at and to hold and to look at from all different angles. There's something interesting. And so to hear your process is very, very interesting. And I hope that it inspires folks to give it a try, to go over there. They might not, I'm quite sure they're not going to be making something as beautiful as what you're making, but there'll be something that they can do.
I'm sure they will.
Absolutely.
Stick with it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Richard.
And the other thing, too, is speaking of raku, there's a video, isn't there, on YouTube? What's the title on that?
Burning down the house.
Burning down the house. Right. We used that one. And it's really quite interesting, because raku, you take it out of the kiln when it's red hot, or white hot, depending on the time of day that you're looking at it. And with tongs. And then you put it in another container, a reduction container, which is normally a trash can. And it's full of paper. I like to use Vaughn's.
The flyers. Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what you use. Anyway, what happens is you put the piece into that pot, and everything starts on fire because it's about 2,000 degrees. So you immediately cover it with another container, and then you got to put towels on it, everything to cut the air from getting to the piece. And the fire eliminates all the oxygen in that container and reduces the glaze. So you end up with these beautiful colors of copper.
Yes, well, we're going to be sure and show those.
Yeah.
But that's not an entry-level project, I'm quite sure, so people have to work their way up to that one.
Yeah.
But thank you, Richard. I appreciate you giving us those wonderful insights, and we'll be showing your work as examples so that folks can see see that process.
My pleasure.
It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
It's great to hear how you're using all of the resources and so forth to improving and expanding your creative endeavors. Thank you so much for joining us today as we learned how creativity can enhance our lives where we create beautiful and interesting things. And we thank very much Nancy Klann and Richard Moren for inviting us into their beautiful home and sharing their process with us. Please be sure and watch us on Village Television at 9:30 on Wednesday mornings, and like us on YouTube, and join us every time on Discovering Laguna Woods Village.